What's going on? I would definitely recommend History.
On January 1st, 1914, Lord Frederick Lugard succeeded in the amalgamation of northern and southern provinces of Nigeria to make up for what is now known as the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, who had assumed office of the Protectorate of Northern Nigeria High Commissioner in the 1900s, has often been considered the British colonial administrator model. So, why did Lugard join two different countries as one in the same year the First World War began? We shall discuss this and more in this video.
Well. We are talking basically, welcome to another day on our new series of talking about the nation called Nigeria. Nigeria gained her independence in 1960, as the video kindly introduced through History Bio. In 1914, Nigeria, the North and the South were put together or amalgamated, joined together by Lord Lugard. And of course, Nigeria in this present day, almost everybody has been talking about something, agitation, apprehension, concern about the whole country, 200 million people, the number one economy on the African continent. But today, as we have seen from our last series, we do have somebody who is very, very knowledgeable, a historian, a lawyer, an author, somebody who put Nigeria right in the midst of historical perspective around the world. And we're talking about Mr. Dele Ogun, who is here today to discuss and expand not just on the Nigerian amalgamation. A lot of people have sent messages saying, oh, who actually signed the amalgamation treaty? And a lot of people as well are talking about restructuring the country. But today we will expand more through the insight and the conversation that we're going to have with Mr. Dele Ogun. Mr. Dele Ogun, you're welcome to the program.
Good evening, Alistair.
Thank you very much. As you have seen a little bit short intro on how Nigeria come to be. Today's topic, really, we want to expand on some of the email messages that we have received from viewers of high caliber, talking about restructuring, talking about even the case in London about Nigeria and PNID. But you are actually good enough. We're actually talking about business here. You are specialists in terms of corporate governance in the United Kingdom, across Europe, and including Africa. Let's quickly start from that 1914, because a lot of people are still saying, who signed the agreement?
The answer, and the short answer, is that no Nigerian signed that agreement, whether on behalf of Northern Nigeria or on behalf of Southern Nigeria. It was a decree that was signed by His Majesty the King of England in Windsor Castle. And so the amalgamation was simply an imposition. People normally speak in terms, when they think about an amalgamation, like a marriage, a coming together. It's better to understand the Nigerian one as a fusion. It's almost as if you're welding metals together. It's a hot iron that is used to force the two together. It is not a union by the consent of either party. It's simply an imposition on both parties. And anybody who's looking for a document that is signed, we the people, as far as the amalgamation is concerned, they are chasing shadows. They will not find it. It doesn't exist.
So there's no agreement that exists of the so-called 6 people plus 22 British during that time that signed this so-called amalgamation treaty?
No, that's pure fiction, pure fantasy. It is what they would like us to believe, that Nigeria was made by our hand and by our consent. But our hand was not in there. It was Lugard and his people who made Nigeria, named Nigeria, and shaped Nigeria. It is not ours.
How can the Nigerian people claim the Nigeria as ours if we now say it is not ours?
Well, the only way we can, the territory is ours, it always has been, and it belongs to all the ethnic nationalities, the 371 of them. It belongs to each and every one of them, their respective space. So that has always been the case and will always be the case. The issue is the political entity called Nigeria. It is not ours. It is there by imposition rather than by our design and by our choice. We can make it ours. That requires the respective parties, again, each of the 371 ethnic groups. It requires their representatives, not those members of parliament who claim to have been elected. It is the representative of the nations, of the ethnic groups that can make a new arrangement that might be called Nigeria or might be called something else. We don't have to be stuck with the name, just as we don't have to be stuck with the design. The design clearly has not worked in our interest. It is not working in our interest. And in my own view, it cannot work in our interest. So therefore, it is our responsibility now that we know the story, before we have the excuse that we didn't know. Now we do know. Our eyes are open to the reality. Our ears are open to the understanding and the learning. And so therefore, the responsibility now rests upon us to make an entity, a country, a state in our own image, for our own benefit and to our own advantage. And that requires the joining of hands of all the ethnic groups to make that happen.
1914 and of course then 1960 when Nigeria secured got her independence from the British colony or British masters or whatever we want to call it. Now within that period, as we shared last time, Nigeria would be celebrating her 60th very soon. There is surely a frequency and a gap between that 1914 when a lot of people felt that Nigeria is indeed progressing positively in terms of return, in terms of investment, at least internally generating investment, because then she was supplying to other advanced nations at that period up to 1960 and before the Civil War. How then where do we as a nation left the path of that progress?
I'm not sure there was any progress. There's a difference between existing and living. Living is purposeful. There's a goal, there's fulfillment, there's growth. If you look at our indices as they were in 1960 and as they are now, I'm not sure we can identify a single positive sign of growth and progress and development. Is it education? Is it the level of integrity within the governance systems? Is it the standard of living of the ordinary people? Is it the state of security across the country? Which one will you take and be able to say hand on heart, there has been progress, there has been growth? We've been running to stand still. It's almost like running on a treadmill as opposed to running on a circuit. We've been exercising the motions of movements, but we haven't actually moved. In actual fact, we've regressed. You know, if you're on a treadmill, you don't run quickly enough. It moves you backwards from where you started. So that's the situation we've been struggling with. And we've been struggling with that because we've been looking for an understanding of what is wrong. It's almost like a mechanic that's confronted with an engine problem. And all that time that's spent looking for where the problem is, that is how we should understand the journey from 1960 up until now. Now we've got a better understanding of what's wrong, and that needs a complete overhaul of the engine, not a repair. It needs a completely new engine, almost like a brain transplant. That brain is not working, take it out and put a brand new one inside.
In 1960, the population of Nigeria is roughly about 45 million. There must have been a progress because right now we're almost 200 million. Though the GDP at that time per head is maybe $1,800. Right now in 2020, according to one of the doctors who researched this, is about $2,200. Now there has been a progress of maybe $400 over the last 60, 70 years as a nation. Is that not something to be commendable for?
As a result of what specific activity? As a result of us producing what? Is it screws? Is it hammers? Is it wheels? Is it cars we're manufacturing? What exactly is accounting for that growth? It is happening notwithstanding the people and despite the people. So therefore the human input, the human content of those figures is zilch. It is simply commodities that are responding to international prices rather than any real development of our peoples comparable, let's say with India, let's say with Malaysia. You mention any of those countries and immediately things spring to mind as to what it is they manufacture and what it is they're producing. Our productive capacity has regressed tragically, such that even the assembly plants that we once boasted of are no more. The factories, moribund. And so we are like a creature that's just existing rather than renewing and re-engineering ourselves and improving ourselves strategically and propelling ourselves forward in comparison with any other countries.
Looking at Nigeria, surely enough in 2020, we have had quite a lot of political, at least in terms of political time we've done, this is the 9th assembly. That means surely enough, some people have been in position of governance and leadership all across this period. When you want to take into consideration, for example, from 1999 to today, there has been various political office holders, either from the PDP to APC, back to PDP, and APC. Somehow, based on expectation of people or based on the actual fact, some of the people that are in governance right now or in offices across many states and across the country are almost the same people that have been there from 1999. Do you then blame the people or do you blame those who are being elected or appointed in office for the position that Nigeria found herself as of today?
Well, let's be clear, they're not being elected. You could go through the ceremony of an election, the appearance and the charade of an election. You can label it an election, but it's the reality of the experience that determines whether what you truly have is an electoral democracy.
Let me ask before you go too far, then what's the meaning of election if they were not elected?
Well, let me tell you what selection is. And then from selection, you then understand what election is supposed to be. Selection is a situation where what we've got, where the political system is so monetized, the amount of money that a representative, would-be representative, needs to be in possession of before he or she can run for office is so huge compared to, let's say, the United Kingdom. You don't need to be a millionaire to be a member of parliament. You can be a nurse or a trade union worker, and you can be elected on the basis of your policies, etc. In our own structure, it is godfatherism. So your godfather backs you financially, or you've acquired those staggering sums of money by other facilitated systems. So that is where the selection is already happening. It is at a campaign fund stage that the ordinary person with good ideas, good solutions, and a genuine interest, a genuine concern for the condition of his people or her people, simply cannot get through, because the selection happens at that point. And then, as I said before, even if you manage to get through to the elections, if the figures are not, if the votes are not counted properly, and we know how many of the cases, electoral cases, election litigation is one of the boom areas as far as the Nigerian legal profession is concerned. That tells you there's a problem with the democratic experience when so many cases are ending up in court, and it is judges who are selecting the winner, supposedly applying legal principle. But the principle that's supposed to be applied in choosing a representative is not legal reasoning. It's simply supposed to be an exercise in arithmetic, whereby the votes are counted sincerely. So that's where you have your what I call elections by or democracy by selection, as against a electoral democracy. The people are too poor, in actual fact, to have a genuine elected democracy, because if you have people on the margins of existence who are going to be vulnerable to influence with a bag of rice or whatever other inducement, their vote is meaningless. The vote is actually being captured. It has been kidnapped by those who are in stronger financial standing, who are able to offer them those inducements. In the comparative countries, because they've got the basics of life over their heads, they've got their homes, they've got they're not struggling for the next meal, essentially. So therefore, anybody who's going to try and take their vote from them by inducements is going to have to pay sizable sums of money. Whereas because they've been left impoverished, the vast majority of our electorates are vulnerable. And so therefore you don't have a proper democracy.
But if we want to take that into consideration as well, that people can compare the money aspect, that in the United States, for example, the coming election, some of their candidates has raised more than $600 million towards their election. That is not even equivalent to, for example, what they have in Nigeria. So does that mean that you may agree that indeed some of the election do cost quite a lot of money for a candidate to emerge?
Well, in America, similarly heavily monetized system, but the difference is this. In America, the fundamentals are in place. What government does is almost secondary, because everything is working, the fundamentals have been in place. The private sector runs itself, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden, it doesn't really make much difference. Whereas in our situation, we put all our eggs in the basket of Abuja. So the person who comes through is critical. If you get somebody who's dynamic, it's possible that you can have a responsive and a dynamic economy and an electoral experience. If you get somebody who lacks dynamism, who is devoid of ideas, you're hostage to their potential in the same way. And so this is why in America, your electorate is not as vulnerable. They've got the basics in place. There's a reason why many of these countries did not give everybody the votes just like that. They ensure that the basics are in place, because they know that if you leave people below the line of existence, you leave them vulnerable to vote capture. This is what we're suffering from.
Nigeria definitely, as we all know, the most populous Black nation. As of today, in the spirit of a season, COVID-19 lockdown and whatever we may describe it, people are wondering about a major case that to them is going to save, or rather is saving Nigeria billions of pounds sterling, because it's taking place in London, which is the PNID situation. How will you, bear in mind that you are around United Kingdom as well. How will you describe this case to the benefit of Nigerians, or to the benefit of the people, or to the benefit of the United Kingdom company?
Well, as it happens, I am a commercial arbitration lawyer myself, so I understand the issues in this case. Let me start by saying that we were placed in very grave danger with a liability, an exposure to a liability in the amount of, as it stands, at 10 billion US dollars. The original award was $6 billion. The accumulation of interest on that award has taken the figure up to 10 billion US dollars, and it continues to count at the present time. Now, what do I mean by that we placed ourselves, or we were placed in a very dangerous position? If the country was running properly, we would not be in a situation where a contract which concerned the production of gas, our gas, in our country, that a foreign entity comes in supposedly to do business in our country with our gas, and we then end up in a situation where the judges, those who are going to decide the rights and wrongs and the liabilities flowing from that contract, are the judges in England. Because the seat of the arbitration, i.e. where the case is to be heard and judged in the contract, they've somehow agreed that it should be London, even though the economic essence, every last cobble of that contract was flowing from our territory, such that if our governance systems was working as it should, we would not even entertain the idea of such a provision being included in the contract. Can you imagine a transaction in Germany where it concerns the resources of Germany, and a foreign company is going into Germany in pursuit of commercial opportunity in Germany, and then they will be told that in the event of any dispute, the matter will be resolved in England? It will never happen. It's a sign that we're not where we're supposed to be at the governance level, and this is the kind of consequences that flow from it. Now, the judgment that has come out, my analysis, I've read the judgment, I see that it is the outrage that Nigerians expressed on social media. Anybody who thinks that social media doesn't count for anything, they are wrong, and they should go and read that judgment. Because if you read it carefully, it was clearly the outrage expressed by ordinary Nigerians that the prospect of this entity that it now emerges actually spent nothing at all, as far as the execution of that contract was concerned. The $40 million that it claimed to have expended actually came from an entity that was owned by one of our retired generals. The land that it was supposed to have acquired, it turns out that although the land had been allocated to this company, this foreign company, the company had not actually paid the 25, I think it was about $40,000 that they were supposed to have paid. They had not paid that. So they hadn't actually expended anything in any real sense. And yet they were awarded a judgment in the sum of $6 billion US dollars. It shows you how dangerous our situation is. Those who are holding back on the changes, the fundamental changes that are necessary in our governance systems, when people are calling for restructuring, that this structure is not working. This is part of the price that we, the people, are paying day in, day out It just so happens that this particular case, we've managed to catch it before we actually paid up. Think of if your viewers were to think back to the debt forgiveness program that during the Obasanjo administration. Yeah. Do you know how much the windfall that the country should have enjoyed from the spike in oil prices as a result on the back of the Iraq war? What happened to that windfall? Significant parts of it was now used to pay back debts such as the ones that are in issue in this PNID, dubious debts, which, as this judgment now has brought out, that the whole exercise appeared to have been laced and tainted with fraud every step of the way. And these are the kind of debts that we were paying as part of our debt forgiveness program. They say, okay, you pay 60% of fraudulent debts and we'll let you off the balance. What kind of debt relief is that? So I say again that we all have skin in this game in terms of urgently getting our governance structures right, because if we don't, we will continue to bleed through the arbitration system, through the litigation system, through the loss of commercial opportunities that will benefit our children and our children's children. This is their legacy that we're fritting away most casually because we're refusing to do the obvious, the stuff that needs to be done to make our country work much more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. It's very more explanation on this issue. But now looking at it, would you then advise or for the government to really go into their archive and bring out maybe some of their old contracts just to make sure that there isn't a similar situation that exists for Nigeria in the near future?
Well, one of the issues that comes out when I read the judgment was this, and I've seen it before in other commercial agreements that are negotiated on behalf of the entity Nigeria. Serious lapses in terms of the provisions that ought to be included in the contract for the protection of our interests. Almost the gate is left open that should have been closed. And as a result, foreign entities coming in to do business are able to exploit that. If you just give you a little bit, your viewers, a little bit of detail in this case, how did the $6 billion figure come about? Mm-hmm. It came about because the contract, under the terms of the contract, it was provided that in the event of breach, the damages that the foreign investor, PNID, was going to be entitled to recover from us was not the damage that it could actually show that it lost. It was the amount of money that it could say it would have earned had the contract run for its 25-year life. So the contract never started in the first instance. It never got off the ground. There was a failure at the beginning. Yet the life of the contract was 25 years. Mm. And so they were able to recover damages by virtue of this clause that was included in there, on the basis that the profit we would have made over that 25-year life of the contract had the breach not happened. What kind of crazy clause is that? And so now it was now left to the judges in the original arbitration to take a view as to how much would this company have made had the contract subsisted for the 25-year period. Absolute guesswork, speculation, depending on the view that one particular judge or the other takes as to the prospects of this entity. If in reality the contract could have, let's say the contract did start, what's to say that that company wouldn't fail in the second year or in the first year, and yet is able to recover 25 years worth of profits. This is the areas of vulnerability that we continue to expose ourselves and our people to. And as a result, we're left with the standard of living that the ordinary people, ordinary Nigerians are experiencing. You can see it's double jeopardy. They're losing money at one end, the money that could be used to lift them up out of their state of existence, to make their votes less vulnerable to capture, is being bled out on one front, and they're left underneath. And as a result of their vulnerable position, they continue to have a situation where their votes are effectively hijacked.
Their vote hijack coming into our second part or not, because you already explained earlier on the issues of the selection or election. Now, the future for Nigeria really, according to many indices and according to many organizations or groups or ethnic grouping in the country, are all talking about restructuring. Now, there is a lot of understanding or misunderstanding of the word restructuring. As a legal person, how will you describe that word restructuring and in the context of Nigeria with high diversity?
Well, we started the discussion in terms of the amalgamation, how the 371 ethnic groups, without talking to each other, the only conversation that happened in the making of Nigeria was between the British and each of those 371 ethnic groups. And the conversation was not the kind of conversation you and I are having, which is intellectual, which is the exchange of words. The conversation was through the barrel of a gun. You signed the treaty. And if you refused to sign the treaty, they deposed you and they put somebody in your place to sign the treaty on behalf of your people. So there was a one-way dialogue between each of those 371 ethnic groups and George Goldie and Lugard. That was the conversation. But there was no conversation across between those 371 ethnic groups. That is the conversation that now needs to happen. And so when we talk about restructuring, we should not confuse it with amending constitutions. That is not restructuring. Restructuring is reshaping the house such that you're creating political living space for each of those ethnic groups, such that they can live in harmony alongside one another, as we used to, because people lose sight of that. These 371 ethnic groups did not suddenly emerge after Lugard came. They were there before they came, and they were neighbors, living side by side, coexisting. It's only that the house was built on top of them, and they were now all inside the same house. Restructuring for the ordinary people, you can almost understand it in the sense that you're living in an open plan room, almost like a dormitory at secondary school, where there are no separate rooms within the house. Restructuring means that you are creating rooms such that you can have privacy in your own space. The house is still there. The house called Nigeria is still there.
Yeah.
You're sharing the roof and you're sharing the physical space, but you are being allowed some discrete space to decorate it the way you want, according to your own value systems, according to your own aspirations, rather than a situation where you're all on top of each other. Mm-hmm. That is what restructuring means.
Now, looking at the question as well as monitoring, for example, how easy do you think the people in the National Assembly would be able to execute this change or this restructuring? At the end of the day as well, the so-called amendment of the Constitution, would they be the best people to amend it? And will you not be happier to have it amended rather than no amendment and no restructuring?
It's not for them. Their responsibility, if they claim to be elected, their responsibility is to get on with governing at present. Let them face that job. They have enough to do on that front. What is needed is the representatives of the nations. Whilst government is getting on with governing to the best of its ability, and the parliamentarians are getting on with supervising governance as they're supposed to under their so-called constitution, the representatives of the nations are now, almost as a parallel arrangement, are now putting together a new formula, a new blueprint for coexistence between the ethnic groups. So it's not one or the other. It is both happening in tandem. Let those who've been elected to govern get on with the governance to the best of their ability. Let those of us and who are out there as representatives of our ethnic groups put ourselves forward, be selected, be appointed in order to go forward and shape the new arrangement. For those who say, would you rather have amendments or no amendments? That is not the choice. It's the prerogative of the people. It's not for those in governance to say, you take the amendments that we're offering you or nothing at all. It doesn't work that way. The people will get their constitution, whether those at the center like it or not. It will happen. If they want, they can support the process. They can work with the people, or they have the alternative of trying to stand in the way of the people. Ultimately, there will be one outcome. The people will get their constitution.
The people will get their constitution, talking about almost 371 ethnic groups. Now, these 371 ethnic groups across the country, surely enough, they do not have one single representative all across the 371 ethnic groups in the country. Will it be feasible, possible to say we indeed have one representative of each of the ethnic group in order for them now to come and sit down? And what happened to the 2014 national referendum that they have?
Well, the 2014 one didn't count because that's those parliamentarians getting up to their tricks again and conspiring against the people. The proper constitutional conference is the representatives of the ethnic groups. I always stress that. Is a representative of not a representative of the states, not a representative of the local government areas. It is a representative of the ethnic groups. Will it be one representative for each of the 371? Possibly not. It could probably be two, just to make sure, that nobody goes there and sells their people out. That there will be these things can be worked out in detail. But yes, is the complaint that we haven't got an auditorium large enough to accommodate 371 representatives? Yeah. Is that a complaint?
Which now is 740
yes.
something.
Yes, who says we haven't got a large enough auditorium to take care of that? Those are just practicalities. It's not a problem at all, because the way it would work, they'll be working from the bottom upwards. Within the ethnic groups, they will have their arrangements to appoint and select those who will go forward on their behalf. It will happen with each of those 371. And then they will meet in the center. And that's when the conference will take place. Not on a single day. It may take months. It could even take years. But it must happen. So the practicality is not a problem. Let everybody agree the principle first and not get excited or carried away about, oh, how many seats are we going to have to arrange? That's a simple part of the problem.
Some of the major ethnic groups across the country are talking about no restructuring, no 2023 election. Will you support that kind of notion, or what kind of advice will you rather they put into consideration?
Yes, I think people should stay with the big picture. The big picture is not the 2023 elections. There's too much wrong with the electoral process, as I've said earlier, for anybody to expect anything significant. It's almost like putting bandage, putting a plaster on a fracture. It needs reconstruction. rather than a plaster or a bandage. And so our priority is not 2023 election. Our priority is a people's constitution. That should be the focus. And the people should, what the power that they have, and I want people to understand this, the power that they have is the right to say, we are not going to legitimize this arrangement any longer come 2023. Because what is the vote, if you think about it? By voting for you, I am legitimizing you.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the authority that I have, I'm passing it to you by voting for you. Citizens are not obliged to legitimize the politicians for them to just go and do what they want. They're entitled to say, I'm not going to legitimize you. I'm going to stay away. And if they do that en masse, not just individuals, but en masse, it would have to be organized. And if they do it en masse, the so-called would-be representatives will have no choice. Watch them. When the people start to organize a boycott of those 2023 elections, watch the reactions of the political class. If you won't find a situation where they say, we don't care, because they need that legitimacy in order to speak to the outside world and say, we are the duly elected representatives. Isn't that what they say now? They said, if you want a change, you must come to us in the National Assembly because we're your representatives.
Yes.
Well, come 2023, let the people tell them, you're no longer our representative, and we're not coming out to anoint you. We're not coming to legitimize you any longer until we get the people's constitution that we've been demanding. Enough of this nonsense.
Nigeria definitely has a major role on the African continent as we begin to look into the way to consolidate her position as a leading nation on the African continent. The situation where the country is, will you ascribe as well in the notion, some people do believe that some of these issues and the challenges the country is facing, it's not just down to good governance or down to only the leadership, is as well ascribed to the Nigerian citizens, they themselves. Will you agree with that notion as well, that maybe their demand is not as strong, as punchy as other nations where they have seen the dividend of democracy in a positive way?
No, the people are not to blame. The people are victims in this experience since 1960.
Right.
They have been injured by those who designed this country, those who put the constitutions together, who designed it in a way to disempower them in comparison to other countries. And so it's only now, as we said earlier, that the people are beginning to understand precisely how they have been duped politically, how their legacies, their rights have been effectively taken away from them with rigged independence elections and with a continuation of the rigging against the true voice of the people. So I don't blame the people at all. No country on this earth has a monopoly of bad people, or indeed of good people. Every country has its mix of the good and the bad. The reason why our experience has been substantially negative is because the structures that were put in place, the constitutional arrangements that were put in place, were designed to elevate and promote and entrench in power the negative elements, the ones who are anti-people, as opposed to, whilst keeping out those who were pro the people. So really, this issue since 1960 has been a battle between the people and Nigeria.
Well,
between the people and Nigeria. And now it's time for the people to get the upper hand over this structure called Nigeria that was placed on top of them. It's now time for the people to get on top of that structure, take ownership. And the only way to take ownership is to get that constitutional settlement, which they can hand on heart say, yes, we the people made it.
We the people can make it. As we round up, let me ask you to mentioning names at all. If you agree that there are ministers that are performing, and if majority of the ministers in the cabinet are performing, or less ministers are performing, and across the country as well, in terms of, we have 36 states in the country, as you know, that there are governors that are actually performing within the limited resources that they presume that they have in the country. What would be your description of the situation as we are getting to our 60th completely as a nation?
Well, let's just put it this way. The measure of performance is not the building of roads. I see so often the commissioning of this road, the commissioning of electric poles or whatever. That is not the measure of performance. The performance that will make a material impact on the future of our people is the one that addresses the fundamental problem with the country. And the fundamental problem with the country is one of the design and structure of governance. That is the bottleneck on the performance of the people. It's almost like there's that fishbone that is stuck in the fruit, that until you take it out to allow you to function normally, or is another analogy will be if you're suffering from indigestion, the brain cannot function until you have that stomach that is settled, such that it's not disturbing your reasoning processes any longer. That problem has been there since before independence, or let's just say since independence, 1960. My measure of performance is how nearer are we to giving Nigerians that peace, that internal peace and security that gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership of the country, to enable them to start thinking creatively as far as the development of their space is concerned. If come 60 years, we're still in a situation where when there's light, we're celebrating and jubilating. That for me is not performance. I don't care how many roads are tarred, because the roads will only last the span of the next electoral cycle at best. That is not a measure of performance. So going back to your question as to who's performing and who's not, there are those in there who, if they've been honest with themselves, they understand the true nature of the problem, as I've outlined. If they want to be said to have performed, they need to be the voice of the people. They need to be the ones speaking to their peers in Parliament, in the National Assembly, to say, look, we need to fix this thing once and for all. Then there'll be no doubt as to performance. So please don't give me performance in terms of tarring roads, building bridges, because those are just capital projects. That we know how the money is made through those capital projects. That's why they're excited about capital projects. It's the soft engineering that's needed. It's not the physical engineering of Nigeria. It's not the physical constructs. It is the intangibles. It is the political arrangement. If they can come up with a design or help us to come up with a design that will work in the interest of all Nigerians, such that everybody will feel a sense of ownership, then we can say they've performed. Until then, they should not speak to us about performance on any benchmark.
Well, last question is basically in terms of the potential strike that may be taking place in the country. What kind of advice would you like to give the labor union and government to try to resolve the situation?
Well, unfortunately, the thing about strikes in an impoverished country is that it's always difficult for people to sustain it for necessary length of time to make a real impact on the people. So it's almost like I wouldn't say a gimmick, because they're protesting to the best of their ability. But government knows that these peoples who do not have significant savings cannot sustain these strikes. over a long period. And so I think if the people could rally behind the strikers, then that might be a way forward. We need more strategic, better organization is what I would say. I think the unions need to talk across the board, not just a single union talking or taking on governments. They need to be talking, joining hands, and joining hands with the people in order to say enough is enough.
Well, thank you very much. I've been speaking to Mr. Dele, who's an author, historian, and a legal practitioner of a high repute here in the United Kingdom, and of course, very knowledgeable on the Nigeria as a nation, have written books on the Nigerian culture, Nigerian people, Nigerian politics, and Nigerian governance. And as he rightly mentioned, he's a corporate legal personality as well here in the United Kingdom and across Africa. Your final word for this moment.
Well, as we say, that the PNID case, everybody should take notes of how close we came to a disastrous outcome. It's not over yet. Let's make that clear. But a country in our condition being exposed to a potential liability of $10 billion US. Think what we could do with that for our education. Think what we could do with that for our healthcare. We were put in that position. We were put at serious risk by virtue of the legacy failings of governance. This should be a reminder. This should shock us out of our complacency and tell us that we need to fix this thing, because there will be the cases that we haven't heard of, where these liabilities have been incurred and these debts have had to be paid. Can we afford to continue this way? It's time for our people to say enough is enough. Let's sit on government and force the constitution that will really be in the interest of all of our people.
Well, thank you very much for spending time with us again, expanding and talking about the legality of policies from government to the people. And that's why we call this program Government and People's Court, whereby we discuss issues to do with policies that affect the people, for or against the people. And subsequently, definitely we'll be bringing you people as well that will be representing the government position in terms of this conversation in order for us to find solutions to our pending challenges. Thank you very much for staying with us, and until next time. Thank you, Mr. Dele, and thank you to the viewers online and offline. Thank you.